Hi everyone. I'm going to take a moment to show you a super simple game that I just played in the 2018 chess.com Daily Chess Championship. I really enjoyed this game. It's not complicated, but I had fun playing it. So I just wanted to share it. This is in this year's Daily Chess Championship. It's the first year we've had it. I think it's been a lot of fun. So far, we've just moved into round two. This game is from round two. To start with, there were 7,300 players. So the field is just huge, absolutely huge field. So there are now about 600 after the players were kind of narrowed down after let's see, only 1 in 12 advanced from each section. So there's 12 player sections. Everybody plays 2 games against everybody, and whoever's at the top of the section, only 1 out of 12 advances. So you drop 1/12 of the players with every round. I think it's going to finish this year, which honestly surprises me. I didn't think we would finish this year, but it looks like we're going to do that. So in addition to playing in the championship, I'm also the TD, which basically means that I set the tournament up and run it and handle some player communications, but mostly it's still handled by support staff like any other tournament on chess.com. So in this game, I'm playing black. I'm playing Gianluca 1111. Gianluca is from Italy. You can see him on the cross table that I added to the video here. That's just got the top 7 of 12 players. In my section that I'm playing in, you see a lot of the games are still in progress. Most of the games are still in progress. I've won all my games so far, but other players have won more at this point in the tournament. So I'm playing black. My opponent's playing white. My opponent plays knight f3. I play the Dutch defense against knight f3. I know some people don't like the Lisitsin or the delayed Lisitsin gambit with e4 or d3 and then e4, but I think it's okay. So my opponent plays d4, knight f6, knight c3, choosing not to play c4, which is normal before playing knight c3. So he's going for a rapid e4 with a knight c3 move. I play g6. Honestly, switching to some kind of stonewall setup against knight c3 is a good idea. I didn't do it here because I wanted to play a different structure, even if it's maybe not as objectively good of a structure. But when they play knight c3, switch to a stonewall and they can't play e4, and really you have a very normal, good position. Bishop g5, bishop g7, so that if he captures on f6, I'll recapture with the bishop. That's what he does. And he plays e4. After the trade, I choose to pull my bishop back, not wanting to let him have it for the knight on e4. Bishop d3. And now I could castle here, and honestly castling is probably okay, but I feel like I'm kind of walking into some kinds of stuff here that I didn't really want to. So instead, I played d5, which I think is a really good move. Computer agrees. Knight should move away. Knight goes back to g3, but this knight really doesn't have much of a future where it is right now. And I still didn't want to castle. Castling is actually the computer's favorite move, which I'll trust the computer. I'm sure it's good. But I felt like I'm kind of walking into it still after some preparatory moves by white. And instead I played queen d6. I'm getting ready to go queenside. And I like this move very much. It just feels natural and harmonious. And the moves that are played in the game make sense to me. And that felt good enough. The way things went is kind of how I was hoping they would go. Of course, my opponent could have played better at some points, but my moves are natural and I like the position that I'm getting from them. Castles, make a pin, c3, knight up, h3, trade on f3 naturally. I'm not going to retreat that bishop. And castles. I could already have played e5, but I chose to castle first, and after rook e1, I go e5. Freeing my position, I had a backwards e-pawn, but my opponent was never going to be able to stop e5. And at this point, I already have a very nice position. I have an extra strong center pawn. My knight and bishop are on good squares, and in general, I'm going to be able to place everything well. My king also is theoretically a little more exposed, but not really. It's quite safe on c8. So the queen goes back. I bring my rook out. Queen c2. Of course, white is losing some time, but it is hard to suggest moves at this point in the game. Now, at this point, I wasn't sure how to improve. I didn't really feel like putting the rook on the e file, which kind of makes sense because the rook goes to an open file from a not open one. Did much for me. So I was looking for a way to improve, and eventually I settled on this maneuver, which I think worked out pretty well. Maybe there were better maneuvers, but I can't be unhappy with the result here. I play my bishop around to f4. Now, this knight is under pressure, and if I get to take it, of course, white's king position will be, a little less comfortable. So I'm putting pressure generally on this diagonal. Now my opponent, I think, should have just played knight f1. Everything's covered. The game goes on. I like my position more than my opponent's, but it's still totally a game, and I don't have a win or anything. Instead, my opponent gave me a win after knight e2. And this is kind of a good point to pause and see if you can find the first move. So you had time to pause if you wanted to find the first move. This one's not too difficult. Bishop h2 check. You're giving check, and of course the king can't take because we get mate in just 2. Now, we could also have given some prettier mate in 3s if we wanted to. Now the king gets to run just a little more, but now we have rook takes f2 mate or knight e3 mate, both quite pretty. But we didn't need that. We had the knight f3 check and mate in 2, which I would give. I'm a purist. I believe if you have mate in 2, you should give mate in 2 instead of mate in 3. Instead, the king goes to f1. Now, the king should have gone to h1. Should have gone to h1. But that lets me take on f2. I win a pawn. My attack continues. King f1. Now I have a really strong continuation. If you want to pause the video again, take a moment to find it. You are more than welcome to do so. So the strong move, and I bet most of you found the strong move here without thinking too much, but I would question whether or not you found all of the moves that follow. We'll take a moment to see if we've done that in a couple of moves. I start with rook takes f2. Rook sacrifice, but a rook sacrifice that's begging to be played. I remove the one defender of the king, and obviously I'm controlling so many important dark squares around the opponent's position. So this should absolutely be considered. Even if you can't see it to the end, you should be looking at this move and trying to make this work. King takes. Rook f8, the most natural move in the world. Bring the other rook in with check. It might be tempting for a moment to try something like knight g4, pawn takes, and queen g3 checkmate, except it's not checkmate. There's f1 to retreat to, and more importantly, the knight covers g3, which is a little frustrating. If the knight wasn't covering some of these key dark squares, this would be basically immediately over. On the other hand, if the knight wasn't covering some of these dark squares, there'd also be an e2 escape square. So we can't have everything. So after rook f8 check, king e3 is basically forced. Any captures on the f file are just walking into captures and a continuing attack. And now the question is, what should black play? So this is where I would really I would really encourage you to pause the video and take some minutes, 5-10 minutes at least, unless you feel like you see it right away, to figure out what the best continuation is for black. This position is one I puzzled over for a while before I sacrificed the rook, because I don't have to sacrifice the rook. I have a strong position without sacrificing the rook. So if I'm going to give a rook, I know I need to find a decisive continuation here. And I didn't find it right away. There's a lot of tempting moves here that I thought about, and they don't quite work. They might give a perpetual, but they don't end the game. I was really happy when I found the move that did end the game, that allowed me to go for the rook sacrifice once I saw this continuation and realized there's really no defense. So you've had a moment to find it yourself. Pause the video if you need to. The winning move, and you actually have 3 moves, but they all have the same idea. And the strongest by far is queen e7. The other 2 are queen d8 and queen f6. And the main point is that you need to slide the queen around this direction. Queen e7 creates huge threats of discovered checks. You need to slide the queen around this direction so that after king d2, you have queen g5. Otherwise, king d2 is letting white escape. Bishop f4 is a move I can mention that's good enough for a perpetual that many of you may have spent a lot of time calculating, but once you see this move, you realize it's immediately over. And bishop f4, if you calculate it, is not over. So queen e7, the king can't run to d2, although white did try that in the game, not seeing my idea. And if you take a moment, you can try some other variations out, but they really don't work. For example, knight d4 gives mate in 1 by covering the d4 escape square. If we leave that escape square open and just make a move and ask black what black's going to do, for example, let's play bishop b5 and say, all right, I see you got the discovery, but how are you going to use it? We have a few ways to win. What I saw was knight c4. Now, if you step to d3, I come in on e3 and it's immediately mate. So you should try d4. And the mate I saw and liked was c5, king takes, knight b6 mate. And that mates in quite a few different variations. Backing up, after queen e7, when the king tried to go to d2, I gave that queen g5 check, and you realize, uh-oh, there's really only one legal move. You got to play knight f4, and now I just take with a bishop. I'm mating by force. My opponent played it out, but at this point he's just shedding material and unable to defend. He plays king back to e1, so I can't take on g2, but I'm just stepping up to g3 with check, and he played king e2, and this was the final mating position in the game. So that's honestly a pretty simple king hunt. It was forced. It looked very, very compelling. If you've seen king hunts before, you've probably seen some like this, but it was pretty satisfying to get this kind of opportunity. You don't often get a successful king hunt. Cool to sacrifice the rook. I enjoyed the quiet move queen e7 to set up the decisive threats and to prepare the queen maneuver around to the other side. So hopefully you enjoyed the game too, and I really enjoyed sharing it with you. Thanks everyone for watching, and I hope you'll check out a future video.